So for now, we're going to turn to Argentina, birthplace of both the Pope and the actual God. Argentina is suffering a severe economic crisis, with inflation running close to 140%. It held its presidential election last Sunday, and as no candidate won outright, there'll now be a runoff between the top two candidates. One is the centre-left finance minister, whose government has been widely blamed for the current financial crisis, and the other, Javier Milei, who, yes, does look like this. You know what? I'll just let him introduce himself.
Hi, I'm General ANCAP. I come from Lieberland. My mission is to kick the ever-loving shit out of Keynesian and collectivist fuckers trying to ruin our lives.
Yeah, just a classic run-of-the-mill presidential candidate dressed like Mr. Peanut, dressed as a wizard, dressed as Batman, pledging to kick the shit out of Keynesians. If I had one note for that superhero, though, it's that John Maynard Keynes probably isn't the most compelling super nemesis. Few economists are. There is a reason that the Avengers fought Thanos and not Alan Greenspan. But Milei is a lot. General ANCAP is presumably a reference to his political philosophy of anarcho-capitalism, a strand of libertarianism that seeks to abolish the state in favour of unfettered free markets. And he campaigned on heavy cuts, suggesting slashing public spending by 15% of GDP and eliminating most taxes. He also has a controversial plan to swap the country's currency for the US dollar, has said he wants to blow up the central bank, and has even smashed models of it in one of his videos, and also in piñata form on TV. He's also symbolised his desire to slash the government by waving chainsaws around in public, an image his supporters have run with, wearing chainsaw masks to vote for him, and even while doing interviews.
The fight continues for Javier Milei, far-right populist who wants to see spending slashed. The chainsaw has become a symbol of this pledge.
Milei is something different that hasn't been tested before.
OK. Not to break my one rule and argue with a guy dressed as a chainsaw, but lots of ideas haven't been tested before. We also haven't tried all trampoline retirement homes or letting a raccoon be chief of surgery. That's because some ideas are just bad. And I would argue that maybe giving control of the third largest economy in Latin America to a guy who looks like he was escorted out of a Comic-Con panel for asking Scarlett Johansson too many questions might well be one of them. And it's not just his costumes and props that are colourful. Take this talk show interview where he goes into more detail about his sex life than you are possibly expecting.
In Tantra, less than 45 minutes is considered premature ejaculation.
Less than how much?
45 minutes. Each man has his own dynamic. In my particular case, I ejaculate once every 3 months.
That's incredible.
Is it incredible? I think it might actually be extremely credible. Because I completely believe that the guy we saw screaming at dead economists, smashing miniature banks on TV and waving a chainsaw in the streets may be a little, and I'm sorry for saying this, backed up. And then there is Milei's obsession with his dogs. He's happily posed for glamour photos with them and held up a portrait gifted by one of his supporters. Just watch as this interview on a talk show gets totally derailed when he sees a photo of his dog, Conan. You don't need to know what is being said here. I promise you will pick up the gist of it.
Que vos aún a pesar de la adversidad puedas aprender.
¿Por qué no puedes ser un buen padre? Porque por el ejemplo
¿Este es Conan?
Sí, este es Conan. Por el ejemplo de tu hijo, alguna vez te escuché, creo que fue el programa. Este es Conan. Creo que fue el programa de Andy, con esos, creo, Si no corregimos.
OK, that is pretty likeable. He just got distracted by his own dog the way dogs get distracted by any squirrel. It's honestly hard for me to criticise that, because that's also how I respond if I ever see a picture of, it's Conan. It's Conan. The point is, we all love things to the extent that they completely distract us whenever they happen to appear. It's Conan. It's Conan. What I'm saying is, it is understandable that Milei struggled to pay attention considering what was being put. It's Conan. Conan.
Quit staring at me, John.
What?
I'm not a piece of meat.
Oh, no, of course not. No, I'm sorry, Conan. I truly apologise. Anyway, like I said, the things we love can be distracting. So it is clear Milei loves his dogs. But you should know, while I've been saying dogs, I really should have just said dog. because all of them are genetic copies of his one former dog, Conan. And the story gets even weirder, because he calls his clone dogs, of which there are at least 4, the best strategists in the world. And according to one biographer, trusts them to a genuine fault.
The dogs he has now are divided into a sort of cabinet. He also believes that Conan, the dog that died, has reincarnated in one of the clones. That dog helps him, and I quote, with the general strategy. Then Murray advises him in economics, and Lucas is the one that helps him see the future and learn from his mistakes. It's almost like an official cabinet.
Okay, at this point, I feel the need to tell you, we didn't invent this man for this show. I get how an anarcho-capitalist, chainsaw-brandishing, dog-cloning presidential candidate who looks like a waterlogged Billy Joe Armstrong and sees his dogs as some sort of clairvoyant reincarnated force functioning as a political cabinet could seem like he was tailor-made in a lab specifically for this show. But he wasn't. His dogs were, but he wasn't. This is a distressingly real person. And while there is something very funny about a politician who workshops his ideas with his 4 dog, it gets less fun when you see what those ideas are, because he's called for expanding gun ownership and outlawing abortion, referred to global warming as a socialist lie, has called Trump one of the best presidents in the history of the United States, and described the Pope as an embarrassing communist, a piece of shit, and a potato. And look, I know we weren't expecting the man with a bunch of clone dogs and a once-per-quarter jizz schedule to have good opinions, but those are strikingly bad. And Milei has a lot of support, particularly from young men. And the thing is, a desire for some sort of radical change in Argentina is understandable, given the depths of the country's financial crisis. People's earnings and savings have been wiped out, and about 40% of Argentines are living in poverty. Things are really bad there. And remember, Milei's opponent is the current finance minister, so he's tied pretty closely to it. It's frankly no wonder that some Argentines, like this woman voting last Sunday, are pretty depressed about the options in front of them.
We don't have a really good option. I didn't came here and said, I know who I'm going to vote. I was like, I don't really know, because nothing is, and I believe that nothing is good.
Right. When your options are more of the same or emo edgelord Tucker Carlson here, it is understandable to believe that nothing is good. And unfortunately, the worse things get in Argentina, the easier it is for Milei to make the case that any change, no matter how untested or dangerous, is better than the current system. So while I agree Argentines deserve something new, I also think they deserve a lot better than this chainsaw-wielding, backed-up superhero and his Xeroxed dog quartet.